All right, all right. Welcome everybody. Welcome to this lesson on critical reasoning and sentence correction. This is, I guess, the ninth lesson in this series where we are mixing and matching various concepts of critical reasoning and sentence correction. Uh, if you remember, if you've been keeping up with this series and keeping up with my lessons, uh, about 2.5 weeks back, we covered various topics pertaining to CR and SC separately in different buckets. Right. For example, there were dedicated classes on stuff like modifiers or tenses or parallelism, or even when it came to critical reasoning, we had dedicated classes to argument construction questions where where you try and figure out what is the assumption in the passage or the conclusion of the passage. And then we had dedicated lessons on argument evaluation questions where we were trying to evaluate the passage, what strengthens the passage, what weakens the passage, right? If there's a paradox, how do we solve that paradox, right? So stuff like that. So I designed this series specifically so that we have we continue practicing all of it. But what happens is, more often than not, if you continuously only try and solve one particular type of question, you get bored very easily, right? You lose out the fun in it. And that is where I come from when I design this series, these specially curated sets of questions where I have mixing and matching a lot of stuff, right? So that it keeps us interested, it keeps us involved, it keeps us engaged. All right. So, having said that, let's begin with the lesson. Or rather, before we begin with the lesson, allow me to give you an introduction of the Unacademy platform. Right. So, Unacademy, my dear friends, is perhaps India's largest learning platform today when it comes to preparing for any competition exam. Right. This specific YouTube channel is for management exams. Right. Management exams like CAT, your GMAT, ZAT, NMAT, IIFT, and the likes. Yes. I am Prankur Arora. I am a writer. I am a trainer and a coach. I've consulted with various organizations for a better part of the last couple of years, where I catered to quite uh, varied aspects of communication, be it verbal or non-verbal. Some of the organizations I worked with, the list includes Interglobe, Marico, Becton Dickinson, FMC Corp, PGCIL, right? So there were quite a lot of organizations that have worked with different industries, different sets of experiences, different sets of learnings. Um, I am also a published author. I wrote this book called It's Not Funny, right? So if you are fond of fiction, if you're fond of comedy, if you're fond of dark, sardonic humor, be sure to check it out. It's available on Amazon. I also hold advanced certifications in facilitation from an American organization called Leadership Management International. LMI is perhaps the world's largest organization when it comes to transformational leadership, right? So they facilitate a lot of programs and increase the effectiveness and the productivity of organizations by transforming the leadership of that organization, right? So that's that. And I run a production house called Tamasha Entertainment, where we produce a lot of theatrical shows, films, and essentially we are working towards forming a channel for creative arts excellence in our country. So yeah, that's pretty much about me. I'm going to be your instructor on this journey of learning, where we'll cover a lot of things pertaining to verbal aptitude and reading comprehension. Right. So, at Unacademy, there are two things that are paid a lot of focus. Number one is the pedagogy that we follow, because we understand that when it comes to virtual learning, the pedagogy has to be ironclad, right? It has to be battle tested, right? So, with that in mind, we offer you daily live classes where we have real time discussions. We organize a lot of mock tests, quizzes, and whatnot, and then we give you detailed analysis of your performance, right? Which is very, very important for course correction whenever you are on a long learning journey. All the courses on the platform, they're all structured courses. They are in line with the current syllabus, up to date with the syllabus, so that you don't miss out on anything. And with one subscription to the platform, you get access to anything and everything. All kinds of live and recorded courses are available to you at the comfort of any of your devices at any time whatsoever. As I mentioned, there are quite a lot of educators on the platform, and all these educators are highly credible people. We've we've mentored aspirants successfully into top tier B schools. Your IIMs and your MDIs, and your your FMS, right? Your Xavier's. Now you can access all these live classes for free, right? You can access all these live classes for free on the platform, and then decide for yourself whether there's more that you want to explore, whether you want to subscribe and you want to reap additional benefits as well. Batches and courses, they keep on going live on the platform on a daily basis. Language is never a barrier because we've got educators teaching on the platform in vernacular languages, right? A really cool thing about the platform is that it leaves the ownership of designing the schedule on you. So you design your own schedule, you have that entire ownership, the entire responsibility, right? Understand that you've got all that power because you choose the kind of courses that you want to enroll into, the kind of educators you want to learn from. So you choose all that, you design your own schedule, right? Plus, learn anytime, anywhere, right? That is all up to you. As I was saying, on the platform, real time interaction happens. We talk in real time. You've got doubts, ask me, right? You want to have a discussion on something, a lengthy discussion, hit me up on the chat, comment, and we have that discussion in real time. Plus, we have live polls where you compete for a place on the leaderboard. So it's another adrenaline rush altogether. Next, as I mentioned, we have a lot of live tests and quizzes. We take mock tests, right? So what do we do with that? We give you an in-depth report, right? A very detailed analysis. Stuff like topic-wise scores, right? How much time are you spending on every question, right? What is the section that is taking the maximum time? What section is weak? Where are you scoring less? Right? So stuff like that, which gives you a lot of perspective, allows you to do some course correction in your learning journey. Plus, all the class notes are made available to you with annotations, with my annotations during this lesson, during this class, and you can revisit it anytime, revise it anytime. It is totally made available to you. Now, coming to the point, right? There are a lot of subscription models that Unacademy follows, right? And you can clearly see that as the time period of your subscription goes up, right, the cost of the subscription per month is going down dramatically. And we all understand, we all know that any kind of learning journey is a long learning journey, right? So brace yourselves for that. Give yourself that comfort level of time. Give yourself that opportunity to develop that comfort level with the platform, with the educator on the platform, right? So be mindful of that gestation period, and I would recommend that you opt in for a longer subscription. Uh, but having said that, any of the subscriptions that you opt in for, if you use my name, my first name Prankur, Prankur, you get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you're going for. Right? Let's begin with today's lesson now. So, first come first, we are beginning with a sentence correction question. The themes that Rita Dove explores in her poetry is universal, encompassing much of the human condition, while occasionally she deals with racial issues. Right? Take 60 seconds and then I'll give you a hint, and then I'll give you another 30 seconds, and then we'll move into the explanation. Okay. Check for agreement, my friends. Check for agreement, uh, subject verb agreement, that is, and then check for parallelism. Check for agreement, check for parallelism, and you'll arrive at the correct answer. What is the subject? The themes. This is the main subject, yes? That Rita Dove explores in her poetry is what is universal. If this is the main verb, you ask yourself, who is universal or what is universal? The answer would be themes. Themes are universal. What is themes? Themes is plural, right? Themes is plural, yes. If this is plural, then this verb has got to be plural, right? So this will become R. So सबसे पहले you eliminate options A and B, don't you? And then you've got C, D, and E. Are universal, are universal, are universal. They encompass much of the human condition and occasionally deals. They के साथ deals आएगा या they के साथ deal आएगा, right? So we eliminate C as well because of agreement issues. D and E are universal, encompassing much of the human condition while occasionally dealing, right? So these two verbs, they are now parallel. We are talking about themes as the main subject, is as or rather are as the main verb, and then we have two secondary verbs encompassing and dealing, and they are parallel with one another. So D looks to be the correct answer to me. Let's look at E. Are universal, they encompass much of the human condition, also occasionally are dealing. So there is a lot of fragmentation here, right? There is a lot of fragmentation. Plus these two verbs are not parallel. Encompass is not parallel with dealing, so we eliminate E as well, and D, my friends, is the correct answer. So this is how we approach such sentence correction questions where two or more rules are being tested simultaneously. All right, let's move on to the critical reasoning question now. Which of the following is an assumption on which the argument depends? Now, this is what is this? This is an argument construction. What is this? This is an argument construction question. Let's read the passage. Many people suffer an allergic reaction to certain sulfites, including those that are commonly added to wine as preservatives. However, since there are several winemakers who add sulfites to none of the wines they produce, people who would like to drink wine but are allergic to sulfites can drink wines produced by these winemakers without risking an allergic reaction. This is a trigger word. Now, this is a contrasting statement, right? This was your premise. However के बाद आपके passage की tone बदल जाती है, right? So read this passage, read all the options, and then I'll give you a hint, right? Because if you're following my lessons, you would know how we tackle assumption questions, right? If not, read this passage, read all the options, and then I'll explain this to you. राइट, इफ़ यू रिमेंबर, जब भी हम लोग एजम्पशन क्वेश्चंस करते हैं, मैं हमेशा एक्सप्लेन करता हूँ कि whenever we're dealing with assumption questions, negate all the options one by one. Understand what the premise is, understand what the conclusion is, and then negate every option. Because if by negating every option you land at an option uh, which is ultimately, uh, you know, forcing your conclusion to fall apart, then that is your assumption. क्योंकि अगर आपका premise है और अगर आपका conclusion है, so the bridge is the assumption. And if you're negating the assumption, then your conclusion has to get impacted directly, right? So if your conclusion is falling apart by negating one of the options, then that has to be your assumption, boss. Right? So let's understand the conclusion first. What is the passage telling you? The passage is telling you कि काफ़ी लोगों को एलर्जिक रिएक्शन होता है सल्फाइड्स की वजह से. Number one, sulfites causes allergic reactions to a lot of people, and sulfites are commonly added to wine, right? They're commonly added to wine as preservatives. ठीक है, तो वाइन पीने की वजह से काफ़ी लोगों को एलर्जिक रिएक्शन होता है, इज व्हाट द प्रेमाइस इज. देन देर इज अ हाउएवर काफ़ी वाइन मेकर्स ऐसे हैं जो सल्फाइड्स को वाइन्स में नहीं ऐड करते, राइट? सो people who like to drink wine but are allergic to sulfites, they can drink the wine produced by these winemakers who are not adding sulfites at all, right? ताकि एलर्जिक रिएक्शन का रिस्क बिल्कुल कम हो जाए. ठीक है, अब ये आपका पैसेज है. लेट्स नेगेट एवरी स्टेटमेंट वन बाय वन, राइट? These winemakers have been able to duplicate the preservative effect produced by adding sulfites by means that do not involve adding any potentially allergenic substance to their wine. ठीक है, नाउ व्हाट आर दे सेइंग? अगर हमें इसको नेगेट करना है तो नेगेटिंग नेगेटिंग 1 minute, right? So these winemakers have been able to duplicate their preservative effect produced by not adding sulfites by any means that do not involve adding any potentially allergenic substance to their wine, right? So if you negate this statement, your conclusion is not getting impacted. Your conclusion is not getting impacted at all. Let's look at option B. Not all forms of sulfite are equally likely to produce the allergenic reaction. Now, if you were to negate this, negating a negative becomes a positive. All forms of sulfite are equally likely to produce the allergic reaction, right? So, even this is not affecting your conclusion because we already knew about this. The passage is already telling us that sulfites causes allergic reaction. C. Wine is the only beverage to which sulfites are commonly added. Negate this. Wine is not the only beverage to which sulfites are commonly added. So, again, if we are talking about wine here, we are not concerned with other beverages at all. So, even negating this did not impact our conclusion one bit. D. Apart from sulfites, there are no substances commonly present in wine that give rise to an allergic reaction. If we negate a negative, it becomes positive. Apart from sulfites, there are substances commonly present in wine that give rise to an allergic reaction. So, if there are other substances that are naturally present, commonly present in wine that give allergic reaction, तो ये दूसरे वाइन मेकर से भी अगर वाइन बोरो करे, द वाइन मेकर्स हु आर नॉट intentionally adding more sulfites as preservatives, right? In spite of that, there could be other substances in the wine that cause the allergic reaction. This is directly affecting our statement. So D looks to be the correct answer to me. But let me look at E as well. Sulfites are not naturally present in the wines produced by these winemakers in amounts large enough to produce an allergic reaction in someone who drinks these wines. Sulfites are naturally present in the wines produced by these winemakers in large amounts, large enough to produce an allergic reaction in someone who drinks these wines. Now, I landed at D, right? I landed at D, but now even E is looking as something that is, that is very very important. to consider, because instead of looking, if you were to focus at D, you would realize that it is talking about other substances. However, here we are talking about sulfites, right? We're talking about sulfites. So E gives us a stronger proposition by telling us that sulfites negate this, right? So this becomes positive. Sulfites are naturally present in the wines produced by these winemakers in amounts large enough to produce an allergic reaction in someone who drinks these wines. So now D was talking about other substances, right? But the passage here is talking about sulfites. So E is a stronger proposition because E is telling us कि bro, sulfites naturally be present होते हैं and in an amount which is large enough to produce allergic reactions, right? So E is giving me an even stronger proposition, right? So therefore, now understand that this was the case with A as well. Just like D, A was talking about other, A was talking about other substances that are, that do not involve or that are not potentially allergic substances, right? If you remember, just like D, even A was talking about other substances. So A or D बिल्कुल सिमिलर हो गए, but E is presenting us with an even stronger proposition because E is talking about sulfites directly. All right. So therefore, E is the correct answer. I hope that made sense to you. Let's arrive at another sentence correction question now. Because the collagen fibers in skin line up in the direction of tension, surgical cuts made along these so-called Langer's lines sever fewer fibers and is less likely to leave an unsightly scar. Take 60 seconds to solve this and then I'll give you another hint. The first hint, not another, but the very first hint. Okay, now look at the sentence. What is the main verb here? This, right? Who is less likely? Or what is less likely? What are we referring to? I guess we're referring to surgical cuts. Yes. This is singular. This is plural, right? So this has to be made singular. जितने भी options हैं जहाँ surgical cuts है, we eliminate those options. So we've eliminated option A and we've eliminated option D. We are left with B, C, and E. I've given you a big hint. Now solve this. Now I'll eliminate option E as well. Why? Because a surgical cut, ये sever क्या है? This is plural form, right? This is singular. तो इसको भी singular होना चाहिए था. But sever is plural, so I eliminate E as well. We're left with only two options, C and B. Now, whenever we are talking about countable things, we use fewer. हम लेस नहीं यूज करते. लेस हम तब यूज करते हैं जब काउंटेबल नहीं होता. ठीक है. We're talking about fibers, right? And fibers are countable. That is why we'll go ahead with fewer instead of less. Okay? I hope you understood this explanation. This wasn't as tough a question. This was a very straightforward sentence correction question that tested your subject verb agreement at a lot of places. All right, let's move on to another critical reasoning question. Which of the following conclusions about country Z's adversely affected export dependent industries is best supported by the passage? Okay, so this, my friends, is an argument construction question. Very, very important argument construction question. Let's read the passage. To protect certain fledgling industries, the government of country Z banned imports of the types of products those industries were starting to make. As a direct result, the cost of those products to the buyers, several export dependent industries in Z went up, sharply limiting the ability of those industries to compete effectively in their export markets. Uh, Read all the options, and soonly I'll explain the entire situation in the passage to you. Right. So let me explain the situation in the passage. I hope you've arrived at your answer choice by now. So the situation in the passage is that there is a country Z, right? So to protect local industries in country Z, the government it bans imports. ठीक है, बैन्स इंपोर्ट्स कौन से इंपोर्ट्स बैन कर रहे हैं? जो हमारी लोकल इंडस्ट्रीज प्रोड्यूस करते हैं उन प्रोडक्ट्स का इंपोर्ट. ठीक है. अब इसका रिजल्ट क्या हुआ? इसका रिजल्ट ये हुआ कि जो कॉस्ट है, कॉस्ट ऑफ दोज प्रोडक्ट्स टू द बायर्स, ठीक है, क्योंकि लोकल इंडस्ट्रीज बना रही हैं, पहले एक्सपोर्ट कंपटीशन था, राइट? सो सोर्सिंग प्रोडक्ट्स वाज चीपर फॉर इंडस्ट्रीज दैट आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन एक्सपोर्ट्स. ठीक है, तो कंपटीशन की वजह से कॉस्ट कम पड़ता था, बट क्योंकि नाउ वी आर प्रोड्यूसिंग इट डोमेस्टिकली, द कॉस्ट इट वेंट अप, राइट? नाउ बिकॉज द कॉस्ट वेंट अप, a lot of export dependent industries, their ability to compete effectively in their export markets, it went down. अब आपको क्या करना है? आपको you have to look for a conclusion, right? So let's follow the process of elimination. Option A, profit margins in those industries were not high enough to absorb the rise in cost. ये क्या कह रहा है कि हमारा कॉस्ट बन गया, बढ़ गया, बिकॉज नाउ इंस्टेड ऑफ सोर्सिंग फ्रॉम export markets, we have to necessarily buy from domestic producers. Those domestic producers, they've raised the cost, right? क्योंकि यहाँ पे लिखा है एज अ डायरेक्ट रिजल्ट द कॉस्ट ऑफ दोज प्रोडक्ट्स टू द बायर्स, सेवरल एक्सपोर्ट डिपेंडेंट इंडस्ट्रीज इन जेड वेंट अप, कॉस्ट वेंट अप, So your raw material cost has risen, because of which probably our profit margins went down, and because our profit margins went down, uh, our ability to compete in export markets, it also went down. अब ये ऐसा क्यों होगा? क्योंकि प्रॉफिट मार्जिन पहले ही कम थे, तो यू वर नॉट एबल टू एब्जॉर्ब द राइज इन कॉस्ट, right? You were not able to absorb the rise in cost because your profit margins were not high enough. So this is making logical sense to me. But let me look at other options before going ahead with A. Option B. Those industries had to contend with the fact that any other countries banned imports from country Z. See, this information is not given in the passage. This information is not given in the passage. We don't know if there is some ban that has been that has been instituted. So I will write no info, and I will straight away eliminate B. C. These industries succeeded in expanding the domestic market for their products. Again, there is no information about this. D. Steps to offset rising material costs by decreasing labor costs were taken. Now, this is a possibility, but there is no mention about labor costs at all in the passage, so I'll eliminate D as well. E. Those industries started to move into export markets that they had previously judged unprofitable. ये तो बिल्कुल ही स्टूपिडिटी हो जाएगी। अगर पहले ही अनप्रॉफिटेबल एक्सपोर्ट मार्केट थी, तो अब मैं उसमें एंटर करूंगा विद इवन लेसर प्रॉफिट मार्जिन, तो वो तो मेरे लिए लॉस मेकिंग एवेन्यू हो सकता है, right? So I straight away eliminate E as well because it does not make any logical sense at all. A makes quite a lot of logical sense. So I'll choose to go ahead with option A. Alright, let's solve another sentence correction question now. Literacy opened up entire realms of verifiable knowledge to ordinary men and women, having been previously considered incapable of discerning truth for themselves. Look at subject verb agreement. Look at pronouns. Okay, guys, now understand that the statement says literacy opened up. I hope you've arrived at your answer by now. Literacy opened up entire realms of verifiable knowledge to ordinary men and women. Right? So, this is what men and women, this is plural. Having been previously considered incapable of discerning truth for themselves. This is themselves. Right? We can look at our answer options. We have himself or herself. We have again a himself or herself, but we are talking about men and women. तो हमें क्या चाहिए? हमें themselves ही चाहिए. It is more appropriate than himself or herself. ठीक है, so we straight away eliminate options C and E. Of whom it had previously been considered they were incapable of discerning truth for themselves. Now this of whom it had been, what is it referring to? This is ambiguous. It had previously been considered they were incapable of discerning truth for themselves. So, this is a very huge, clunky, awkward way of expressing something very straightforward. And this is again a big question mark. तो हम D को भी eliminate कर देंगे. हमारे पास है A and B. Now this having, ये having किसके बाद आ रहा है? ये having सीधा women के बाद आ रहा है, right? women having been previously considered incapable of discerning truth for themselves. But we are not referring to just women, we are referring to men and women, right? So we need a word like who that refers to the entire phrase of men and women. ये verb अगर सीधा women के साथ आएगा तो this refers only to women. But if we use a who here, who refers to the entire noun phrase, and that is why we'll eliminate a as well and we'll go ahead with the. Alright? I hope you've understood this explanation and that you also landed on the same solution. Very very important bold face critical reasoning questions. These are rather tough, right? So let's deal with one right now. In the argument given, the two portions in boldface play which of the following roles? So you have to decide on the roles they play in the passage. Let's read the passage. Although the earliest surviving Greek inscriptions written in an alphabet date from the 8th century BC, the fact that the text of these Greek inscriptions sometimes runs from right to left and sometimes from left to right to left, left to right, indicates that the Greeks adopted alphabetic writing at least 2 centuries before these inscriptions were produced. Very very important, guys. What is the first line telling you? The first line is telling you कि uh, earliest surviving Greek inscription written in alphabet form 8th century की है. ठीक है, तो आपको सबसे पहले टाइम पीरियड दिया है 8th century. Now they are saying the fact that the text of these inscriptions sometimes runs from right to left and sometimes from, ये कह रहे हैं कुछ right to left होती हैं और कुछ left to right होती हैं, right? This indicates that Greeks adopted alphabetic writing at least 2 centuries before this. इसका इन्होंने क्या रिजल्ट निकाला है कि इन्होंने 6th century में शुरू कर दिया था. This indicates that alphabets were adopted 2 centuries before. 8th century में अगर inscription produce हुई है तो alphabet कब adopt हुए 6th century में. ठीक है, this is what the conclusion is. After all, the Greeks learned alphabetic writing from the Phoenicians, and presumably along with the alphabet they also adopted the then current Phoenician practice with respect to the direction of text. ये कह रहे हैं कि ग्रीक्स ने फिनिशियन से लर्न करा, ठीक है, फिनिशियन से अल्फाबेट सीखा, एंड उस टाइम फिनिशियंस का जो ट्रेंड था राइटिंग का, डायरेक्शन का ट्रेंड, राइट टू लेफ्ट, लेफ्ट टू राइट, वो भी इन्होंने फिनिशियन से ही सीखा. ठीक है. नाउ देयर इज अनदर बोल्ड फेस स्टेटमेंट व्हिच सेज एंड ऑल्दो फिनिशियन राइटिंग वाज ओरिजिनली इनकंसिस्टेंट इन डायरेक्शन. ये कह रहे हैं शुरुआत में फिनिशियन राइटिंग वाज इनकंसिस्टेंट इन डायरेक्शन, दे वुड मूव फ्रॉम राइट टू लेफ्ट, लेफ्ट टू राइट. By the 8th century, Phoenician was consistently written from right to left and had been for about 2 centuries. What are they saying? They are saying कि 6th century तक Phoenicians directionless थे, but 6th to 8th century उन्होंने direction adopt करी, और 8th century तक they were only writing from right to left. ठीक है. सो यू नो व्हाट द कंक्लूजन इज. दिस पार्ट इज द कंक्लूजन कि ग्रीक्स ने 6th century में अडॉप्ट करा अल्फाबेट और उन्होंने फिनिशियन से सीखा. दिस इज द कंक्लूजन. फर्स्ट बोल्ड फेस स्टेटमेंट, व्हाट इज इट टेलिंग यू? इट इज hinting towards it. What is the second boldface statement doing? Even that is hinting towards it, right? So take a couple of minutes, arrive at your answer, read all the options once more now, and choose an answer, and then I'll explain it. So option A, it says the first and the second each describe evidence that has been used to challenge the position. Are we challenging the position? What is the position? Position is Greeks ने 2 century पहले, मतलब 6th century में फिनिशियन से सीखा. फिनिशियंस ने सिक्स सेंचुरी से पहले दोनों डायरेक्शन में लिखते थे, बट सिक्स सेंचुरी ऑनवर्ड्स दे चोज वन डायरेक्शन, राइट? सो the both of these bold faced statements, they are not challenging it, rather they are supporting the position, right? So we eliminate A. B, first is evidence that forms the basis for an objection. No, it forms the basis for support. We are not objecting to the position of the passage, we are supporting the position of the passage. So we eliminate B. C, the first is evidence, all right, that forms the basis for an objection. Again, they are talking about objection. We are not forming any basis for any objection. Rather, we are forming basis for support. D, the first and the second each provide evidence in support of the position that the argument seeks to establish. Yes, this looks to be the correct answer to me. E, the first provides evidence in support and the position that the argument seeks to establish, and the second is that position. No, second is not the position. Even second is providing support. Am I being clear on that? So E is also incorrect. D is the correct answer. A and the first statement and the second boldface statement, both of them are supporting the position. The position of the passage. Just give me a moment. Yeah. The position of the passage is this middle part, right? Because what are they saying? They are saying कि हमें इस चीज का indication मिलता है. After all is the trigger word. So this is the position of the passage. This statement and this statement both are supporting the position, right? That is why we eliminated E, because the second part is not the position at all. It is supporting the position. D is the correct answer. So, guys, this brings me to the end of today's lesson. Very crisp and short lesson on quite a few different types of questions pertaining to CR and RC. हमने मॉडिफायर भी करा, हमने अग्रीमेंट भी करा, हमने प्रोनाउंस भी करा, हमने पैरेललिज्म भी करा, हमने अजम्पशन करा, हमने बोल्ड फेस करा, हमने स्ट्रेंथनिंग वीकनिंग करा, राइट? सो very mixed bag of questions that I brought to you today. I hope you had fun solving all these questions, because all these questions are very, 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 very important when it comes to being up to date with what the exam demands from you, right? So go through this video once more. Go through this video once more. When you're going through the video, at every juncture, whenever there is a question that comes up, pause the video, solve the question by yourself, and then press play, and then compare my rationale with your rationale, right? Understand where I'm coming from. If you have also reached the right answer through some other means, some other rule that was perhaps making sense to you, let me know. Comment on the video, let me know what rule appealed to you, and what was your rationale for reaching the same answers. All right, till then, guys, stay safe, stay strong, and stay mellow. I'll see you again.